Good evening, church. It's really good to have you with us this evening. And tonight we have Pastor Nick himself. I get to interview my favorite adopted dad / only adopted dad. And tonight we are speaking on depression, which is a topic that we've actually been meaning to speak about for a very long time. And so, Pastor Nick, yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. It's always good to be here with my favorite eldest daughter. And I just want to say that, it's important, and I'm hoping a lot of men are watching.
Yeah.
Because, as men, we often think that it's such a weak thing to
Yes.
suffer with depression, and that's a woman thing. But the reality is that many men suffer with depression. And the sad thing is that most men actually don't even know that they're struggling with depression. They're just grumpy. But actually, they've got depression, hopefully we can share a little bit of our stories a bit today.
Yes.
And I'm just hoping that we're going to be able to help many people just deal with depression.
Yes.
And actually come to what's the word? Not peace, but come to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that there is something in my life that I need to deal with, and it does impact those around me, and I must deal with it. And there is a way to deal with it, and it's normal.
Yeah.
And there's no taboo, no stigma that we have to worry about.
Yeah. I was actually reading some statistics on depression before our chat, and it was just saying that women are twice as likely to feel depressed than men are. And I was thinking, I wonder if that is because women are not okay with showing it, but men just have that stigma of wanting to be strong and lead their families, and so there really is like no time or no other option but to be strong in that. And I mean, we've been talking about this for a while now, is this pandemic is causing a lot of strain on men. And so, Dad, how are you feeling with this whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing you say there, Lee, because I think that, I think far more men do struggle with it. I don't think men are in tune with where they are emotionally as women are.
Yeah.
If you ask a guy, how are you, he'll say, I'm fine. That could range from, I'm going to jump off a cliff to, no, I'm actually okay, but I'm fine. And because to kind of verbalize actually what I'm feeling is very difficult for men. And so, I think what you're saying there is very true.
Yeah. I think that we often also have this thing around you can only be depressed if you have a certain amount of responsibilities. And so today we're actually going to talk to Dr. Denise Scott. She is a clinical psychologist, and she's helped a lot with the counseling in our church also. I mean, she's someone that I would go to in a heartbeat. But the reason that we are talking together today is because we want to break that stigma around you have to be a certain age or have a certain level of responsibility to be feeling certain levels of depression. And so we're going to be real about that, and then we're going to ask Denise a bunch of questions that we hope will help you today. So getting into the real talk bit, okay? This stigma around depression is only experienced at a certain level of life. I used to definitely think that. And when I was, 22, when I moved out of home, I asked because he was there the whole time. I had a depressive, stage of, it was a few weeks, but, and I remember thinking, what do I have to be depressed about? Because I'm 22 years old and I don't really have that many responsibilities. It doesn't really make much sense. All that had changed is I'd moved out of home for the first time. And I remember you saying to me, Dad, that, it's okay because it's a massive change in your life. But I felt like I couldn't cope with life, and it made me feel weak, like I wasn't strong enough or equipped enough, or sometimes didn't even trust God enough to deal with it without getting into a depressive state. And so tonight we want you to understand that you don't have to be at a certain level to feel these symptoms, okay? And that it is very real. Yes, okay. So let's talk a little bit about you, Pastor Nick. You obviously are very prominent in the church. I mean, you have 2 beautiful daughters, but it's big responsibilities. Do you ever go through stages where you feel a bit down or depressed, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, Lee, I think that To be honest with you, I didn't really struggle with depression for most of my life, actually. It was only when I went through the divorce that I started to struggle with depression. I think that before then, I had a very negative view towards it. I thought it was for wussies. I thought it was for people that can't deal with life. I thought it was, it was just emotional stuff that women go through. That typical kind of misunderstanding of it. But then I realized that circumstances play a very, very big part in our emotional well-being. And although I'm a pastor, and I'm a man, and I must now go for counseling. And I remember fighting this whole thought about counseling. Why am I going for counseling? But I went. And let me tell you, it was probably the best thing I've done for my own life, because what it opened up there was an understanding of me as an emotional person. And what I need as an emotional person. And it was difficult, because I had to work through what I'm feeling. and it's easier to say I'm fine, but I did. And so over the last probably 10 years, I've done quite a lot of research, a lot of reading around the mind, around emotions, around depression. And so I now am very able to pick up when I'm starting to dip, and when I'm starting to move into a more depressive kind of frame of mind in my own life. And I've learned ways, and we're going to talk about that today, how to deal with that, because it doesn't have to be debilitating. I do think there's clinical depression. That's a very different thing, and I don't think we're talking really much about that tonight. We are just talking about mild depression that we all struggle with. And so so my story was really just about an awakening to a reality that depression's a real thing. It's a real thing in a man's life. As I said, it's very circumstantial in my life, but I think that you can beat it. It doesn't have to hold you. You can beat it. You can rise above it, and you can deal with it. And I think that's kind of what I've learned in my own life over the last probably 10 years has become a reality for me.
Yeah. So we actually asked Denise a bunch of questions that we thought would be good to share with people and just create some understanding around depression, how you would deal with it. Are there different stages? And so we're going to chat through the questions, and then you can listen to Denise's response, which is really exciting. She really is very phenomenal, and she's been so just amazing in terms of just adding input that she thinks would be good in all of it. And something we actually spoke about was, she was saying there's a difference between kids and adults and how they express feelings of depression. And that was something that we kind of touched on in the first week. And so the first question I asked her are the signs and symptoms of depression always the same in every person, or do they look different? And I know for me, I really just felt helpless. Like I wanted someone to save me, but I didn't want anyone around me, and I didn't want to be alone, but I only wanted to be alone, and I wanted to sleep all the time, but I could never sleep. And just that thing of like, somebody pull me out of this thing was so... I felt helpless. I don't know. So that was how I kind of, dealt with that. I mean, highly emotional and just kind of helpless in that. How do you start picking up on?
Yeah. Well, for me, the telltale signs that I need to look after my emotional health is, when I don't want to do things.
Yeah.
I everything just seems like it's just too much. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to get out of bed and go and deal with the nonsense at the office, or this or that and that. And it is. I want to be isolated. I want to be alone. I want people to leave me alone. I don't want to get back on my phone calls. All those. When I start to think like that, I start to realize, wait, there's something here that I need to start dealing with, because obviously, for me, that's a telltale sign.
Yeah.
Is just tiredness, this always feeling tired and always feeling that everything is like a chore. Then I start. That's normally when I know, okay, it's time. Now I need to start looking after myself a little bit differently and start to implement some of the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight.
Absolutely. Let's hear what Denise had to say.
Thank you so much for having me come and speak with you with regards to mental health and depression in particular. My definition of psychological health is the ability to stay functional, to stay stable through change. And you and I know we've gone through so much change so radically, no one could anticipate the extent of it and the impact that it's going to have in our lives. But you know, we cannot underestimate the impact of the prolonged lockdown and the stress of the threat of a virus on our lives. If we just think about work as an example of what many of us have lost, the routine of work. Work is very grounding for us. It provides the structure in our lives and also a sense of control. And having a sense of control is important to not feel anxious or have this continuous sense of anxiety. You know, people who've been depressed have shared with me that they feel like they're in this deep pit with no light and in complete darkness. And in essence, what they're saying is they feel also a sense of hopelessness and helplessness about their current lives as well as their futures. So, talking in particular about depression, there are varying degrees of depression. They are mild, moderate, and severe. And this severity is really based on the number of symptoms, the intensity of those symptoms, and the way in which they impact functioning. So someone who's severely depressed would be so listless and so dysfunctional that they're unable to even take care of themselves, not to mention playing the roles in their lives. Someone with mild depression, for example, we may not even pick up that they're depressed unless we ask really pertinent questions. Moderate depression, you might find that someone is not themselves, but perhaps their family members or people who live with them would really pick that up a little bit better.
So our second question is, we spoke a bit earlier about just the stigma around depression and how it's kind of a taboo subject, and how if you are feeling depressed, it's almost looked at as weakness instead of just what it is, that it is a normal thing. Many people suffer from depression, and you're not any less of a person if you are dealing with it. So we asked Denise, what causes depression? What can some of the causes be, and can it be prevented? And I don't know, what do you think?
Well, Lee, I just want to get on the whole taboo thing. You know, I think that that's why whenever there's a discussion on depression, I'm always saying, you know, I'm happy to chat because I want to break the stigma, particularly amongst men. You know what I love about men? You know, you break your leg and you put it on Instagram, broken leg, and everybody's like, woo, you broke your leg. You know, but when you're a bit broken emotionally, then now I must go and hide in a closet and nobody must know because now I'm weak. Yeah. And I think to myself, how bizarre is that? How crazy is it that part of the way God made us physically, if it gets hurt, we go, oh, that's okay. But another part that God made us emotionally, when that gets hurt, oh no, it's a problem. And this is why I'm so passionate about Lee, because you know what, a bone heals. Yeah. But an emotional person who's broken hurts people. Yes. And hurts their families and hurts their friends. And not intentionally. I'm not saying that now they're going, but because they're broken, even at a little level. You know, and you know, I mean, me and you, we talk a lot about, we fight a lot of times, but we often take out our frustrations and the angers on those that are closest to us, our family, our children. And let me tell you, and that's what bothers me so much about the stigma, is that there's so many men that are actually damaging their families and their relationships simply because they're too scared to talk about this thing, this emotional thing in their lives that's slightly broken and just needs some healing and some care. And so I don't know, I pray that we over time can break the stigma, that men can say, man, I'm feeling down. You know, I'm feeling a bit depressed at the moment. Please pray for me. You know, encourage me. And not have to stand in a closet and go, oh no, they're going to think I'm a wussy and I can't look after my family and I can't provide. No, I'm not this big man. That, you know, I think it's a bigger man to say, listen, I need help in this area of my life. That's a bigger man than a man that acts like he's all in control but is falling apart. You know, and I think that's why we must break this taboo, particularly amongst men. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's something that you taught me was that. Like you say, physical ailments heal, but we can't often see the severity of our inner pain, which I think is so much more difficult to relate with other people with. I mean, if I see you have a broken leg, I'm like, oh, shame you have a broken leg, that really sucks. But if I see you hurting, it's difficult to say how severe is that, like how far down the line are we, and something that I think in terms of, obviously Denise is going to answer the questions for us, but in terms of prevention, I think a really good thing is being able to understand what you're feeling and verbalize it, and also to understand what your telltale signs are. And so I know that when you get really frustrated, you kind of retreat and everything is stupid. Everything is so stupid. And but I don't do that. I guess I also get really frustrated, don't I? Yeah. And so prevention, I think, part of it is learning how to actually verbalize what you're feeling and feel what you're feeling and say, you know what, I really am struggling right now.
No, absolutely, Lee. I think that what you're saying is very important. We obviously talk because we're very open about where emotionally, where we're at. And, it's so good that we are like that, because often I would come to you and I'd say, Lee, are you okay? And you'd like, yeah, I'm fine, but I know that you're not okay. And then we go through the normal conversation. Yeah. How's your exercising? How's your eating? How's your sleeping? All those kind of things that help us deal with these things. And that accountability is actually fantastic, because it really helps us. I mean, we can't avoid the pressures of life. We can't avoid things when they fall apart. Some things happen, and we move into those kind of depressive states. But to have a person around you that can identify it and go, you know what, how's it going? We know exercise is a biggie. Exercise regularly helps your emotional state. Somebody that can actually talk into that. It really helps a lot.
Yeah, I think this is more like practical, but if we could give any advice, it would be to find a person that you can work through those phases with, and that you can get to know their signs. And I know you pick it up by I tap my knee. Yeah. And so that's when I'm starting to get really anxious, and I don't even really, it doesn't even click. But I think, if we could say anything, get someone in your family or around you to have a safe space, a safe circle where you can be accountable to each other in that sense.
And Lee, I think the thing is that initially when we started, don't take offense when somebody comes to you and says, I'm noticing here's an issue,
Yes.
How do I help you? Don't judge me, which tends to be the way we like to respond.
Yeah.
I think over time we've learned that vulnerability of saying, you know what, you're right.
Yeah.
When I see you tapping your foot, I know that your anxiety is very high.
Yeah.
And that defensiveness needs to be broken. The vulnerability needs to come through, and with somebody that you feel safe with, because that's just going to help you.
Yeah.
It's going to help you a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's see what Denise had to say about this question.
Right, let's discuss some of the symptoms of depression. People can become depressed at any age, but generally the likelihood increases with adolescence or puberty. And it's important for parents to realize that young children can also become depressed. For me, I'm picking up that a lot of teenagers and even younger children are spending so long on the internet, on YouTube, gaming, that they're actually numbing themselves, and they're unaware that they're stressed and anxious. And because they're unaware of it, the parents think that they're okay because they're happy doing what they enjoy to do. But they're unable to express it, and they're unable to address it. So I think that's an important point. So the first symptom I'd like to discuss is the depressed mood, low mood. With children, that really looks more like agitation, frustration, low tolerance for anything minor that might happen. So they'll be quite irritable. The second one is a loss of enjoyment or pleasure. And that's a pretty common one. Things that they used to enjoy, they'll find that for the last, it has to be a minimum of 2 weeks, they would have found themselves unable to enjoy those things. And also that with that may come some social isolation. And I think we are in isolation, but it can look like they've actually avoiding even talking online with their friends, with younger people. There are some things that we should also bear in mind. Bodily functions, for example, your appetite change or weight change, your ability to sleep through the night. So we're talking really about quantity and quality of the sleep. Physical activity, being listless and unwilling to do things around the house, things that they used to do generally in routine, and even just a general low, decreased energy, low energy. The other symptom is a feeling of worthlessness or guilt, but this is really an inappropriate feeling and a sense that others are seeing them that way, and the guilt is often irrational as well. Another symptom is difficulty thinking and concentrating or focusing on things that they need to pay attention to. The last symptom I'd like to discuss is fairly worrying, and I think it's worth paying attention to, because often people will have recurrent thoughts of death, and the thoughts of death can be so scary for them that they may begin. I've often found that young people will come and tell me that they've had those thoughts, and the thoughts is generally what brings parents and families to seek help. But it's not just the thoughts. It might even have a plan, might even have made attempts at suicide. But those are the general symptoms of depression. You ask, Lee, what are the causes for depression? And you know that's a very difficult question, because depression is really a very complex disease and no one really knows the cause. But what we do know is that there are some people that are at higher risk than others. So let's have a look at some of those risk factors, if we may. I believe that people who are in isolation or in lockdown alone are at higher risk, and particularly the elderly. And I think so are children, single children that don't have a sibling to play with or a playmate to play with. Those who've had depressive episodes before are at higher risk, as well as those whose family members have had depression. And that suggests that there's a genetic predisposition towards depression. People who suffer from excessive anxiety are also at risk, because they seek to control the environment, and in a way the environment has been controlled for them. Certain personality disorders are also quite important factors. Others are those that have been abused. People who've gone through physical and sexual or emotional abuse are at higher risk. People who live in homes of high conflict, where they're unable to escape the conflict, the sense of helplessness must be enormous for them, especially now when they're unable to go to work or to leave home. Medications, certain medications can lead to depression. For example, acne medication. I've seen many young people and adults who've had depressive symptoms, and it's been understood to be because of the medication. People who've lost loved ones and unable to grieve properly, that's a pretty good, because we know that there's such a thing as interrupted and unresolved grief. And if they're unable to really grieve their loved ones during this time and have their family members come together, I think they are very vulnerable, and I think we should be mindful of them a little bit more. Major events in life, like a divorce, like a separation, retrenchment or retirement, those things increase our stress levels, increase the stress response. And if there's no sense of being able to have mastery or to do something about it, we can actually also begin to feel helpless and begin to develop some depressive symptoms. Social isolation is a big one too. And I think social isolation is the main one, because we are really social beings. We are intertwined. We live in communion and in community with one another, and we have perspective taking. We have healthy understanding of how life works by engaging with one another. So if one follows really the social isolation to the T and doesn't apply those other options like online communications and checking in with one another, I think that could be pretty harmful and leaving one pretty vulnerable too.
Okay, our third question today, and I think this is a really important one because, especially if you do identify that it's some depressive symptoms, one of the biggest things is reaching out for help. And so we asked Denise, can depression be self-treated? And I know that's something you do a lot. You'll identify that there's a space where you're feeling really down and you know exactly what it needs to be able to pull yourself out of that. And I think maybe, do you want to share on that?
Yeah, Lee, I think it is over time you do learn to identify where you're at. And it's about being real with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, I think the greatest thing for me is that I don't have it doesn't make me feel like I'm lesser. You know, I feel the same way about that I do about when I get the cold. I know there's a couple of things I need to take. I need to sleep a bit more, and you know, I'll get through it. No problem. But I think that you just need to know yourself. You know, you need to try different things. You know, I don't know. You know, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but this is from my own experience. You know, I think that when I start to find myself in that space, I know I need to spend more time with Jesus. You know, I know that I need to get more and more into the Word. I need to pray more. I need to just get my quiet times more structured, because I find that a lot of my emotional healing actually comes in my quiet spaces with God.
Absolutely.
And then, as you know, I like to talk through my problems. So, you know, I'll often phone you, or I'll speak to one of the guys in the team and say, this is what I'm working through, and not because I'm looking for an answer. I'm needing to unpack.
Verbalize,
I need to get it out of my system.
Yeah.
You know, and I need to talk, and I need to talk, and I need to talk. And then you know, like I was saying, you know, I love golf, but golf is like almost part of that process for me. You know,
Yeah.
I love just getting out there. You're in your own space, so there's people around you, but you're in your own space. You're out, you're walking, you're exercising, and a lot of thinking time, which helps me a lot personally. And so, praise God, and I do thank God for it. I don't take any medication because I've learned that I don't need to. I can deal with it through other methods. I'm not saying if you take medication it's wrong. I'm not saying that, but for me it hasn't been at that level. So I think you know yourself. You know what begins to work for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you just need to be like you do with a common cold. You know, when you get a cold, you know, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Exactly the same way I do now when I'm starting to feel emotionally drained. I can feel I'm getting into this depressive state. I know I go through my steps, and you know what, it takes a couple of days, and I'm out of it. You know.
I think something that I just want to pinpoint there is, yes, you need to know yourself, you do, but you also almost need to force yourself into a space of taking those steps towards healing, because I find that is the most difficult thing, is you don't actually want to do anything. You don't want to get up. You don't want to talk to anyone. But for me, I need to be around people. I need to be around my family and my friends. And that for me is normal. I need to talk about what I'm feeling, and I need to be around people. And but that's kind of the last thing you feel like doing. And so in treatment, if it is a thing where it's not as severe as needing psychology or medication, you do need to almost be countercultural and push yourself out of your comfort zone to be able to take those steps towards.
Yeah, and Lee, you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
You can't put it under the rug
Yeah.
and hope that in 2 weeks' time I'm going to feel better. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, and it just lingers and lingers and lingers and lingers. You know, you have to be intentional. You have to look it in the eye and say, okay, I've got to deal with this now, and you deal with it. You know.
Absolutely. I think something for me that was big was I constantly pushed my anxiety and stress down to the point where I would be sick because of it. I would get ulcers or stomach inflammation, and I was in and out of hospital all the time. But the reason was because I wasn't actually dealing with anything. And so as much as we say it's not going to go away, it will come out in another way. And I mean, we've laughed before. There'll be meetings where it's such a silly thing and I'll burst into tears because I'm just so frustrated. And it is a real thing. Like, dealing with it is crucial. It's not just maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. So let's see what Denise had to say about this question.
You know, the prevention of depression is an interesting question and a good one. And I think if we have mild or moderate symptoms, there are certain things we absolutely can do to prevent the more severe, the more clinical type depression. And, you know, I often encourage people to take daily tiny baby steps, and doing those daily little things, they find that they can get their heads above water. And so, yes, there are some essential things to do. And in fact, I view mental health very much like physical health, just as we need to do daily things to do with diet and exercise and good sleep in order to keep our bodies healthy. The same is exactly true for mental health. So I'm going to talk about what some of those things that are good for mental health, in particular during lockdown. So having a good morning routine is important. And I think for us as Christians, the first thing to do is to start the day in prayer. We set the tone for the day, and we have God's purposes guide us and influence us in the day. I, in particular, I really enjoy prayer journaling. And in my journaling, I write things that I feel are the activities for me for the day, and the worries that I might have about those things, or things that have been on my mind or in my heart. And I just feel that in the journaling process, in the prayerful journaling, that the Holy Spirit brings His instruction. He gives me counseling in those areas, and I just find the day goes a little smoother. So that's a good way to set the tone for the day. I would also suggest avoid the news, or plan when you're going to watch the news, because we generally don't have good news on our media. So I wouldn't start the day with it. I wouldn't turn on your social media or even the news in the morning or before bed, because that will perhaps not allow the body's way of managing stress to be switched off in order for us to rest at night. Sleep is a very important factor in managing depressive symptoms. In fact, research have found that 87% of people with depression have been able to reduce their depressive symptoms by just managing insomnia. So that's extremely important, and I would really encourage you to consider the quality and the quantity of your sleep. We need to listen to our bodies and manage the time in which we go to bed and the time when we wake up, and keep that to the routine. Okay, there is such a thing as sleep hygiene, which is worth having a look at. Just research it, Google it, and you'll see it gives you lots of tips of what sleep hygiene means. Showering first thing in the morning and getting up and getting dressed. Not walking around in our pajamas is very important, and that can energize us. We always feel a little better after a shower and after we've dressed in a way that's pleasing to ourselves. Getting outside is so important. You know, even if you're just sitting in the sun, this sun doesn't really burn too much, but it gives us good vitamin D, and vitamin D is essential for management of mood. We like to put seed and fruit out in our bird feeder, and we watch the birds, and that just being in nature and watching nature is so healthy for us. Exercise, even if it's just a few minutes a day, it gets our blood pumping, it gets our heart pumping, and not to mention all the good endorphins that we are left with. Music is important. Play music that is uplifting. Teenagers generally like quite sad, heavy music just to match their mood, but I would suggest really praise music is good. It lifts the soul. It's really good. Social interactions is essential. As I said earlier, we are very much social beings, and we cannot maintain our mental health without engaging with one another. And so now is not the time to isolate from one another. We should actually reach out and connect with family members that we might not talk to when we're so busy with work, and even lost friends, and just express your feelings for them and care about their well-being. It's so good for us.
All right. So we are coming to the end of our real talk, and we hope that you are feeling a bit encouraged by the fact that we all are going through similar things, and especially with this global crisis, I think that is definitely causing high levels of loneliness and depression. And so we asked Denise, what advice would she give to someone who feels like they may be experiencing signs of depression? And I think it's so important, like we were saying before, is to get the help that you need, whether it's talking through it with your family, trying to understand what you need to get through it, or actually going to seek professional advice.
Yeah, Lee, I think that for me, the turning point was when I realized that what's in me has to come out.
Yeah.
You know, if I keep it, it just, like you said, it has different side effects, you know, with your health and relationships and that. And when I understood that principle, you know, the fact that you know, before I was like so anti-counseling. Oh, you know, real men don't go for counseling. You know, they work it out themselves.
Yeah.
You know, that was my mentality. But when I started to go through counseling, and I realized just the freedom that you have, just to be able to unload and just to let go of things, and the impact that has on your emotional space, you know, and that's why things like exercise is important, because you're releasing something, you're getting it out of your system, and I think that for many people, I mean, I've been a pastor for 10 years, I've been a Christian for almost 30 years, and you know, what saddens me today still is that so many people don't understand this principle, that what the Bible teaches is that we need each other. We carry each other's burdens.
Yeah.
You know, the Bible nowhere talks about you go isolate yourself and work through it yourself. You know, actually the Bible tells us don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, we come into a community. That's why we're in families. That's why we're in communities. And it's that vulnerability that you can have in those kind of spaces that's so important. And so it's a very important thing that we do. We do see that the solution to this kind of thing is often that I need to reach out.
Yeah.
I need to connect with somebody. And that's the start of the process.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Let's see what Denise said about this question. What do we do in terms of getting treatment for this? And what if you are feeling symptoms?
You know, if you find that you are unable to even do those tiny steps, those few steps that are discussed for one to do to maintain mental health, or you find that you do them but the symptoms persist or they're increasing, I would really recommend that you not leave it and that you go and seek help. Reach out. Speak to your parents if you're a child, or speak to a trusted person who can guide you. I would definitely recommend visit your doctor. Discuss with your doctor. Your doctor will ask you just the right questions to determine whether you are depressed or not, and even consider what medication might be best for you, or discuss how to take the medication and what to watch out for. That's quite important. Also, you can go to a psychologist who will work through what you're going through and perhaps give you some coping tools that will be quite pertinent to your situation, as well as perhaps the counseling house at the barn. So there are people that you can reach out to. Often people struggle for too long, and the danger of not addressing these symptoms is that they can escalate, and it can begin to bring some level of dysfunctionality or disability in the way we do our lives, and that is the danger. If you, for example, if you're diagnosed with diabetes, would you not go to the doctor? Would you not continue the treatment? Would you not monitor your diet or take insulin on a daily basis? The same is true with depression. There is no need for it to be seen as a stigma or as a weakness in the part of who we are. I really feel quite strongly about that. You know, the Lord gave us instruction to guard our souls. And I see that in the words of Solomon in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, he says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. And you know, from that scripture, I hear that there's clear instruction that we really are to guard our hearts, that we are to be mindful of our emotions. We are to be taking our emotional temperature on a day-to-day basis. And we are to consider how we think about things in our lives as well. And that is not weakness, that's wisdom, in the words of Solomon.
And the biggest question on everyone's lips today is, well, definitely mine, because I watch the news every day. Like, I make a point of doing it, but it's something that really has got me down recently, because you never know what's real and what's fake. And it causes a lot of panic. Like, one day it'll be like, everyone in South Africa has got COVID. And then the next day it'll be like, everyone's recovered. It's so confusing. And I guess the more panic they can create, the more news sells, which cool, but what is the truth around it? And so we asked Denise, there's been a lot of talk of a depressive epidemic happening because of the lockdown, because of loneliness, because of strained relationships, because now you're isolated with each other. It's difficult, the loss of jobs, the loss of income. And so we asked just, how do we take steps towards dealing with that? And I mean, you can't prevent a crisis, but we can work on our reactions, which I think is so important. And so we asked Denise, can we take steps towards avoiding the pandemic that's happening? Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things, and especially as Christians, that we can do is reach out to your people. Our church is our family, and not just the bond, but our global family. And not just the church, but every single person you encounter is an opportunity to show love to people. And I'm not saying like break the 3 feet boundary, but I am saying that you have daily opportunities to reach out to people in need. And I think the best way we can help prevent that is by looking towards others instead of only looking inward. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense, Lee. I think that there's a couple of things that are important. I'm concerned because I know that from my experience, and like I said, I'm not a psychologist. Mine's from, my thoughts around what I've experienced and what I've experienced through people that I've connected with and worked with. But change is I found that change has got there's a high correlation between change and depression. And I'm not sure if that's scientific or clinical, I don't know, but I have seen it in our communities as we counsel people. And so not everybody thrives on change. Most people find it very daunting. Now, this is a massive change we've just gone through. So I look at it and I think, my goodness, how are people going to deal with their emotional well-being over this time because of all the change? Now, here's something. There's two things I just want to say on this topic. One is that I found that we definitely deal better with life when there's routine.
Yeah.
Okay. So change breaks our routine.
Yeah.
And so we feel overwhelmed. So bring back routine. Mm-hmm. And even like we were speaking a few weeks ago actually about living in this communal house, and now we've got all these people, and one of the things that's going to help us through that is just put in a routine. Let's put in a routine around this is what a day looks like, that's what a week looks like, because it just brings safety and structure to everybody and takes away all that anxiety and depression that comes from that. The second thing is that like you said, I think that the Bible tells us two things I found pertinent on the subject. One is that put on a garment of praise for a spirit of heaviness. Okay, so it talks to me there about perspective. It talks about, am I going to look at the heaviness, or am I going to look to the God that I praise, because He is the one that I'm going to look to for in my troubled times. And then depression comes because of troubled times a lot of times. And so secondly, look at your perspective. Are you focusing on this stuff, or are you going to focus on God and allow God to work through your circumstances and trust Him? The third thing is Jesus said that His work is touching other people's lives. If I could paraphrase that, and I think in that there's so much wisdom. When we start to reach out, there's something that's blessed to give, than to receive.
Yeah.
Now, when we get into our threatening spaces, change, all that, we just want to get. We want to get safety. We want to get more money. We want, but actually, the Bible tells no. Think about giving.
Yeah.
Because there's blessed means happiness, in a very simple way. But and so if you put the Bible into practice, you go, okay, the more I give out to people, the more blessed I'm going to be, and that can only have a positive impact on your emotional well-being.
So let's see what Denise had to say about this last question, and if you just joined us, we were talking about just the epidemic and just the depressive state that might come out of that.
Lee, unfortunately, I do think that we can anticipate that with the social, psychological, and the economic impact of this epidemic will be with us for a long time, if not a year or two. But the extent and the exact nature of it, we can't know for sure. And my philosophy really is that whatever we can't control about our futures, we hand over to God, but we take the responsibility for today and we do our very best today. With physical and mental health, economic stress, all in the balance with the coronavirus, I do think those that are vulnerable to depression are at greater risk now. But we have to know that God is our strength and our refuge. Jesus himself, before he went on the cross, he prayed to the Father and he said, make us one with them, just as you and I are one. He prayed for unity. And I think what we should be praying for is that the Lord will knit our hearts, that his love for us and the love for one another will be a godly love, so that we walk a road, we care and take care of one another, those that he's brought into our lives to take care of. And that is how we'll overcome this time in our lives. I think the rest we leave to God. My second recommendation that I think is extremely important is that we should be now really praying, proclaiming and declaring the living word over our lives. Psalm 91 talks about a plague and security and the protection we have in the Lord. And so we look to our Savior, who will save us and bring us through until he comes again. Thanks so much for having me.
And with that, church, we flew through this topic, and I'm sure we could do weeks on this. But if it is a thing where you are feeling like you need help and you need to reach out to someone, and you may not have people around you, please reach out to us. This is what church is for. We're all one family, we're one body, and so our heart is to help our family, And so we really hope that if it is a thing where you are feeling symptoms or where you do need help, please reach out. We'd love to be able to help you. And like we said, we're trying to break a stigma here. So reaching out is not admitting weakness, but rather it's actually admitting strength. I think in the end is saying, you know what, I identify something in me and I'm going to be strong enough to reach out and ask for help. And I think the strength is in the kind of humility in it and vulnerability in it. And so, church, we just want to encourage you, please make sure that you don't deal with these things alone. The last thing we want to see is this heaviness over this community.
Yeah, Lee, I think just from closing thoughts from me is that obviously my passion is to see men embrace the fact that they are emotional. There's an emotional part to them, and that sometimes that's broken and it needs some healing. And what I find so frustrating, I said it earlier, is that I see it a lot. Broken men hurt people.
Yeah.
They're short. They quick to put other people down. So and it's that whole principle is you feel much better because now somebody else is feeling worse. And I see it so often. I see it all over, particularly amongst men. And I think to myself, man, I wish we could just have a chat. Sit down and say, what is it? why are you? What is it that's putting you into the space, and how do we help you?
Yeah.
Because the winner at the end of the day, if we deal with this, is going to be those you love, those you work with, your church environment, all those kind of things. There's so many spaces in your life that are going to be so radically different if we deal with it, and if we deal with it effectively, and life is going to be different if we deal with it and deal with it effectively. And so I think that, I just want to echo what you say. If there's any guys out there and you're saying, man, I think I just want to reach out and talk to somebody, do that. Our pastoral team is well equipped to help with that. I think as a pastoral team, we've all had our moments where we can say we've struggled through this, and it's real. And so we definitely, I think we can help.
Absolutely. I also just want to thank Denise so much. She honestly has been so phenomenal and so willing to answer questions about this. I think we all going through this together. And so if you do have more questions for Denise, please post them online, email us. I'm sure she wouldn't mind getting back to us and answering questions for you. And like we said, if you do need help, please reach out. We really are available.
Lee, I just want to say that is going to be a recording is available on our website.
Yes.
And so if you're watching this and you got a family friend or a friend that you think, man, they would really benefit, why don't you just share it with them?
Yes.
And get it to them, and let's see, maybe God's going to do something special for people.
I hope so. I really do. And church, just a final encouragement is we are praying for you constantly. It's a thing where we've split our congregations, we're phoning through, and we're praying for people. And it really has been, this topic specifically has been so heavy on our hearts because we care about God's people, and we know that you care too. And so we hope that you've enjoyed this talk today. We hope that it's been helpful for you. Please connect with us online. We would love to hear from you.